Ray Dalio is the world's most well-known macroeconomic investor. He started Bridgewater Associations in 1975 and turned it into the largest hedge fund in the world. Dalio has certain beliefs regarding the United States economy. Let's dive into the video to know the facts of those beliefs. The co-chief investment officer of Bridgewater, the biggest hedge fund in the world, Ray Dalio, has said that a new financial catastrophe is just around the corner. The 72-year-old millionaire issued a dire warning that the United States may suffer a horrific economic catastrophe. In an exclusive 25-minute interview on CNBC, Dalio shared his thoughts on the economy and where it stands right now. Let's dive deeper into the video. Ray Dalio believes that there is a cycle of a new world. He explained that in 1945, a new world order started after it was decided that the world would be divided. Because America was a dominant power at that time, the dollar was made to be considered the world's reserve currency. Then came a time when the world was fighting and America had all the power, followed by a time of peace and prosperity. What Dalio said next would blow your mind. Although it looks well thought out and researched, if you get into the depth of it, you'll notice that Ray Dalio is trying to warn about something big. Dalio's recent social media posts and interviews point towards the future of the United States of America, a future that doesn't look good if you see the big picture. Let's start with Ray's opinion on the economic turbulence. That we have been in the 12th and half cycle since 1945. It was the first New World Order and had the first monetary system. We have an unstable and weak economy in 2020 due to COVID and the change in the government of America. Dalio had spent the last year studying business cycles and the rise and fall of various civilizations. After deep research and analysis, Dalio framed them in a series of Twitter posts and called it the change in the world order. This segment, we're going to focus on a particular part of the Dalio series named the classic toxic mixture. What is the mixture and who made it? Ray's Twitter series will answer these questions backed by reliable data and economic history. If you read between the lines, the tweet states the factors that break down great countries and economies like the United States of America. In simple language, Ray explained that when the money was hard or solid and was connected to gold or was gold, the government would break that link and introduce soft money. This led to the printing of more money. However, this would increase the fluidity of cash but could not improve living standards. The only way to improve the standard of living is through redistribution. Similarly, the money received in checks and used for spending will help their standard of living but will decrease the value of the cash and bond because a bond is a promise to receive a large sum of currency. This eventually shifted wealth into financial assets and always drove the value of stocks up high. Continuing the same example, he stated that this will always drive the gold higher and impact the currency level. America had come along since the Second World War when it became the focal point of the world. According to a study at UC Berkeley, 3 years after the war, in 1948, the top 0.1% of the U.S. had a 10% share of the country's wealth, and this number moved down to the bottom in 1978. After 1978, the top 0.1% began an epic rise, estimated at 23% of the country's wealth. Now, the United States is in a situation where 3 billionaires, Warren Buffett, Bezos, and Elon Musk, have more money than 50% of America. In simple numbers, these 3 men have more money than 190 million Americans altogether have. If we look at the situation on a bigger graph, the top 0.01% is the uber-exclusive club that owned 3.5% of household wealth in 1960. But that number has risen to 11% and is still rapidly increasing. This divide is still rising, and the pandemic's impact is creating financial stress that is far and wide for the government. Dalio has also criticized policymakers for their short-term thinking and inability to address these structural issues. He has argued that politicians are too focused on winning elections and pleasing their constituents rather than making the tough decisions that are necessary to address the long-term challenges facing the country. Dalio quotes, "From a study of over 50-plus civil wars and resolutions, it became clear that the single most reliable leading indicator of civil war is bankrupt government finances, often after an economic shock and when there are big wealth gaps. This happens when the government does not have the financial power to save those entities of the private sector needed to keep the system running. It does not have the power to pay people to make people do what they need to." And this is what's happening with America right now through the Federal Reserve, which has consistently built institution after institution. There'll come a time when they will no longer be able to do that. Dalio stated that this is a forecast and will lead to more debt. It will instill a fear of bad times and decrease the opportunities to borrow and lend, especially when we have a reserve currency because the world will want to save that. This will make the country go deeper into debt. This will lead to an increase in debts that seem like a rise in prosperity. But after a certain period, the limitations will be apparent when the central bank can't produce the money and credit so easily. This happens when you reach zero interest rates because you can't do the same. Monetary 1.0 is an interest rate monetary policy, and when this doesn't work, the government shifts to the next monetary policy to print money and buy financial assets. But that purchases of financial assets widens the wealth gap because those who have financial assets do better than those who don't, and this keeps widening the wealth gap. When this gap increases, there comes a downturn in the economy, forming a lot of conflicts. So, what do even the central banks do? If they raise taxes, they take money out of the economy, reducing expenses, which create a problem. So the central banks or any entity that prints money, runs out of currency, has large debts, is in deficit, and can access adequate credit has only two options. 1. Go up taxes and cut spending a lot, or 2. Print a lot of money, which will reduce the currency's value. Now, in this scenario, the governments that have the option of printing money will always do it because that is a much less painful path. But here, the investors run out of money and go into debt. The governments that cannot print money must raise taxes and cut spending. This encourages those with money to leave the country or move to another jurisdiction. Why? Because paying more taxes and losing services is intolerable. If these entities that cannot print money have large gaps between their constituents, usually lead to some form of civil war. One of the key issues that Dalio has highlighted in the widening wealth gap in the United States, he has urged that the top 1% of Americans now own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined, and this is causing social and political unrest. According to Dalio, this is not just a moral issue, but also an economic one, as a lack of consumer demand could lead to a recession. But the founder of Bridgewater Associates is worried that when the downturn occurs, which he estimates will happen within the next couple of years, investors, businesses, politicians, and policymakers may be caught off guard, or worse. Our political system, which is based on capitalism and democracy, will come under even more criticism. Dalio believes that the only way to prevent a financial catastrophe is to address these issues head-on and implement structural reforms that can help address the wealth gap and debt crisis. However, he also warned that if the United States does not take action soon, it could face a long period of economic stagnation and decline. As someone who is meticulous about planning everything out, Dalio is aware that unpleasant surprises can cause panic, self-preservation, and other frightful reactions even in typical calm individuals. Despite his dire warnings, Dalio remains optimistic that the United States can avoid a financial catastrophe if it takes action to address these issues. He has called for a new era of cooperation between the public and private sectors, where policymakers and business lenders work together to implement structural reforms that can help address the wealth gap and debt crisis. Only time will tell if his warnings will be heeded and if the United States can avoid a financial catastrophe. That was all for today's video. We hope you enjoyed the video. Do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We'll be back with more exciting videos. Till then, stay safe and stay informed.